Good afternoon, this is Oxinity Talks in Education. So new habits in education for ESL teachers and students. In the second decade of the 21st century, we are facing a lot of changes in our life. So we hear a lot about collaborative approaches and collaborative ways of working. Let's take, for example, planning our holidays. If we want to travel and plan our holidays, are we still thinking of a travel agency? Or instead, we may remember that there are companies such as Airbnb or BlaBlaCar. So a lot of new business models are emerging lately, and we talk a lot more about collaboration. How exactly does that affect education? And do we have collaboration in education as well? What new habits we have to acquire as teachers, and what are the new habits of our users, the students? So about all this, we're going to talk with Louis Morris.
Hello.
Rob Wiley.
Hello.
And Graham Bell in Malaga.
Hi.
My name is Radmila Gurkova. Let's get started. First question will be for you, Graham. When we think about engaging English learning, do we still think of an academy, for instance, or there are other contexts that our learners want and need?
About going to an academy, because it goes back from when you're at school, going to high school, then university. It seems like the natural progression, and especially with exam preparation, exam centers. If you're looking to pass your first, your B2 to get a job or to go to university, an academy seems to be more appropriate. But within those contexts, sometimes the levels can change. You might be in a larger group. I mean, modern teaching, they are aiming to have smaller groups, but often with price and with expense, it can be a large group. So sometimes people also with their less time they have available to actually go and learn, they're looking towards the online market.
Louis, what are some new learning strategies now?
I think, as Graham mentioned, we're moving away from exams in many ways. If you want to go to university or for certain jobs, you have to pass your Cambridge or something equivalent. But a lot of the time now, we're teaching for life enjoyment or to improve in a particular area, like in travel and tourism or in business. And so we have to adapt the way that we teach. So we're moving away from a sort of exam-based, more summative way of assessing and testing people towards a more formative method, which means the teacher has to know their students a little bit better, probably work with smaller groups and know what they need. So it's about more bespoke English education as opposed to the old academy way, I think.
Graham, we talk a lot about online learning, for instance, classes by video conference. So what options are there, for instance, for if a student were to choose online classes?
Want to learn anything, you can get a tutorial on YouTube. So lots of people are looking to YouTube. They're looking to perhaps mock exams that you can download. You have many popular apps, Babbel, Duolingo, and also tutorials that teachers put up on Instagram. We have an emerging market of online teaching in Asia, and you see lots of this step towards kind of more online teaching, especially, as I said before, with time management being so difficult. But it's one of the things that with an online community like we have, we combine all of those. We've got the ability to prepare people for exams. We have apps included. In Skype as well, we can online teaching and video conferencing. You can still maintain that balance.
Well, Graham mentioned apps, but is an app actually a good learning tool? What do you guys think? Can a student learn with an app? Only an app?
It depends on the student. I mean, students come in all shapes and sizes, and some people learn very well and they're motivated for self-study, but without the teacher there to direct you, an app can be a little bit
we need the human
directionless.
The human figure.
Yeah, I think so. And the apps tend to be very repetitive. So we mentioned before they teach you many times how to say the girl drank milk, they drank milk, but then to expand that out to speaking in
There's not so
natural
much
context.
conversation around
There
it.
is
It's
no
just the
interaction
same,
actually.
yeah. It's just the
with-
same kind of patterns over and over and over
And
again,
that
I guess.
can be, I guess, just an extra
An extra tool.
Mhm.
something
Again,
extra.
to play.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do teachers need actually? How can we use these tools that we have? Because Graham mentioned learning over Skype, but is that enough? Do we need
Well, I
something?
mean, I guess you still need a platform, right, where you can show the lessons. You know, you still need to have that student-teacher interaction. They need to be able to see materials. So I guess with technology as it's going forward, that becomes more easier. But yeah.
Okay. So a lot has been said about the role of the teacher. Has it changed over the years, Rob?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess, you know, if we think about our school days or in the past, it was a lot about the teacher just standing at the front of the class and just talking to the students, whereas now in sort of ESL learning, we tend to talk about the teacher being a guide or a playmaker, so, you know, reducing the amount of time that they're talking and encouraging the students to be talking as much as possible. I guess especially for a language, right, that's something that you need to be doing is through practice that you're going to improve and progress.
All right. So I guess no more or there is less of a teacher standing on the board explaining. something
Exactly,
on the
yeah. It's
board
not the
and
teacher
more-
standing with a board and just writing and the students just copying what the teacher's writing. We want to be encouraging the students to be speaking as much as possible, and the communicative approach does that.
Okay, great. So, Graham, there is more and more demand for classes by video conference. But what are the challenges that live web classes entail?
I think going back to what Louis and Rob were saying there is when you're looking at all these options that you do have online with your apps, they're not very communicative. So that becomes the biggest challenge when you're trying to prepare stuff for online, is to make sure that you are creating that kind of acquisitional environment. You have the right images. So for me, the big challenge is the preparation of your material. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult to do TPR, to do total physical response with a student online. You can't create a setting like you would in a classroom. You can't get your students to stand up with you and let's go for a walk around the environment and get involved. So you have to create this with your material. It's also very difficult with your interaction with your student. Things like seating planning. You have to make sure that your computer is in the right space if you've got a group room. It's very difficult to then manage the classroom. To be able to control them using their L1 to communicate with each other rather than continuously keeping the class in the learning language. It's challenges, but it's our preparation that gets us ready for that.
The main benefit of having the option of a class by video conference is that eventually we get to many more students. Potentially, English has no limits, or teaching English has no limits. So it's all about, I guess, learning how to adapt to this online way of communicating. When we talk about engaging classes, what is necessary? So far teachers have been using textbooks a lot, but is it enough? Because everything is changing so fast. What else is necessary?
Yeah, I guess so. Like you mentioned, there's lots of textbooks and books that teachers use. They are limited, so you would have to add your own extra material to it as well. It's a textbook alone is not enough. So what we do here is we all together, the teachers, we create our activities or our lessons. And so I think on average between 150 to 200 activities we create every month. So that means that the activities can be current. So we're talking about what's happening right now. They're engaging, we can help each other to create the activities. And so, yeah, a textbook alone is not enough. We can also edit that material in real time. So, I mean, if there's been a change, you can make it real time and it will change across the platform for everybody's class.
And how exactly does that benefit the teacher? Because if one person alone has to do all this work, I guess it's very hard. So how exactly collaboration helps here?
I mean, the fact that we're all working together, right? We can help each other to think of ideas. We can brainstorm ideas. We can work together as a team. I think that's the most important thing, teamwork, you know, and we can together as a group create the best material for the students. And we also improve activities, so maybe we could take some of the older activities or lessons that we've got and add to it and modernize them so that material's available for us to teach as well.
Yeah, I think working 20, 30 hours a week teaching that many classes, it would be impossible to spend your weekend preparing to teach all of those classes in independent activities. So having a community is vital. I think.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do we make all these people work in the same direction? How
I mean, by meeting from time to time, you know, we all meet and we all think of new ideas and we learn from each other. I think you know, if we see each other teach, then, you know, I think you could think, oh, that was a good idea. I've just seen that person do that in class, so I can do the same, and thinking of ideas together, I guess.
Of course, and of course it requires quality checks as well on the activities, which I think we do quite well.
Okay. So Louis, over the past 4 years that you've been with us, how has your life as a teacher changed?
It's 4 years that I've been working for Oxbridge, but it's actually 7 years because I had a period of time where I was away. So it's changed a lot in that time. Like even when I passed my TEFL, I took the exam on paper and everything was on paper and it was quite heavy carrying around, you can imagine. I'd have to go to the hotel in Caipé de Madrid and collect my work and put it in my bag, and it's heavy carrying it around all day. And there are advantages and disadvantages. Obviously it wasn't great for my back to be carrying around all that paper, and I have a very small laptop, so that's different. But on the paper you can annotate things. And for a long time we didn't have the ability to annotate our activities, now we do. But I feel like the technology's been catching up. So the things that we did have on the paper, like we had the comments box, we now have the notes, it's starting to be similar. The negatives of moving to a paperless method is I had 3 classes yesterday and I had no internet access for any of them. That makes it very difficult, so I have to screenshot classes. So we're relying on technology which isn't always there, because if we teach at a chemical company they don't give us access for security reasons and everything like that. But it's small things to overcome. Perhaps if we had communication with the classes to let them know they have to give access to the teachers.
But if I were to now make you choose between digital classes and paper classes, what would you choose?
It depends if you buy me a new computer. With a new computer I would take digital, but with the one I have currently, it would be better for me on paper.
I would buy you an iPad, maybe even better.
That's an offer.
Yeah,
it's on camera as
I'll
well
take
now.
it.
All right, excellent. So, Graham, what about assessment and correction? So, the idea of a teacher taking or correcting with a red pen, is that a reality or not anymore?
It's to try and keep everything verbal. So if students have work to do, say for example that they have a piece of homework, if it's a writing piece, then it's getting them to read that out and working with them verbally and trying to use some cues to correct them. I hate seeing a red pen in a piece of paper. It makes me feel like I'm failing, but it's nicer to keep it verbal. And setting, as we're going to the point with setting homework, it's different now. I mean, I don't like the idea of setting someone homework as such. I always think back to the fact they need to do 5,000 hours, more or less, to learn a language. And to think of that amount of time doing homework or classes seems a lot. And so I kind of give guys links to videos, trying to encourage them to listen to music. I mean, these people are adults, most of the students that we have. So telling them what they have to do seems a bit patronizing. So I try and kind of make things fun, give them some nice TED Talks or YouTube links, documentaries. That's the sort of kind of advice that I give people for homework and further development.
I think homework is problematic too, because if you have a syllabus that relies on your students doing the homework, as a teacher you can't make sure they do that. So it's better to know what they're doing in class rather than to rely on them to do the work, especially with adults, as you say, we don't want to discipline them. It becomes very complicated.
What would your advice to students that want to do some extra class practice be?
I suppose it depends on the student. Some people need to work on their listening, some people need to work on their speaking. Podcasts I think are very useful as well as the visual media, because you're just listening and it can be on in the background. So anything like that. And I think one of the strengths. A lot of students want native teachers. Actually, I don't think the quality of the English of native teachers is better, but the cultural differences that we can share with them is interesting too, and perhaps we can use that as a tool to get them interested in learning the language.
Okay, excellent. So we have a question from Julie. Do you think that lessons outside are a good idea? I guess
Outside in what?
I guess not in a classroom, but outside.
You mean like in a cafe or in
For instance, in a
Well, the
cafe.
Greek
or-
tradition of walking around with your students, it's a nice idea. It requires you to have a quiet place.
Well, she is actually an archaeologist, so I guess that, and I know that she's taught in museums.
Mhm.
So I guess, or in a park. She says a museum, exactly.
Yeah, I guess.
What
I
do you
mean,
think about
I mean, especially if they're kind of learning English for the idea of going traveling. Then if you're in a museum or somewhere like that, then it's likely to be a setting that they're going to be in when they're in the country that they're visiting. So I guess, yeah, you can then work on the little expressions, etc., that will be useful for them. But yeah, I think it's a good idea actually. I think the students also relax a lot more when they're not maybe in such a classroom environment. You know, often
Absolutely.
being in a cafe, a quiet cafe, and having a coffee with students is good.
I think if you want to move towards using more technology, then a park could be complicated for obvious reasons. But it depends how you organise your class. And visual media, it's difficult in the park. But if you prepared your class, maybe as a one in every few classes,
Yeah.
you could do that. It'd be
But
nice.
with your new iPad, remember,
Mhm.
you can achieve that.
That's true.
All right, so we kind of mentioned it that right now we have a tool, we use it here, that allows us to edit activities in pretty much real time. That means that if we spot something spelled incorrectly, for instance, we can fix it. So that's the idea of we call it the live book.
Mm.
Okay. What, in your opinion, are the advantages? Are there any disadvantages of that idea?
Well, I think the advantages are obvious straight away. A live book can constantly be updated. So you don't have anything that's out of date. You don't need to reprint a second edition, which is very costly and it takes time. On the other hand, Wikipedia, for example, is probably the most common example of a live book that we have in society. Universities don't accept it as a reference. So that maybe questions the quality of it, because what you don't have with live books is you don't have editors.
Mm.
So it's a nightmare for editors because things can change. We are all the editors of our live book here at Oxbridge, and sometimes maybe we'll see a spelling error or something like that. It's great that we can get in there and correct it. So there's positives and negatives to it. The other side, I suppose, from my perspective is the Kindle. The first edition of the Kindle that came out, the coding that was used is now out of date. So if you bought all your books on the Kindle so you can have a library in your pocket, it doesn't exist. But if you bought the books, they exist. So as long as the technology is consistent,
Yeah.
maybe I wouldn't trust Apple or Amazon, but Oxbridge, why not?
All right, fair enough. We have a question from Peter. Can you train to become a teacher online through an app?
No.
No.
I would say no. Graham, I can see shaking his head as well. But yeah, no, you have to have the real life situation. You have to be in the classroom, right? You can only learn so much in theory, but you have to be there, you know, in the classroom or out in the park if that's where you choose to be. But you have to be with the students, and you can only learn so much through theory.
Right, excellent. So, a question from Mirka. Mimi, is it possible for Oxbridge to provide us with offline material in order to solve the issue of not always having internet? Offline material is the screenshots that we
It would
always
be a very
talking
good
about.
idea. I don't know how hard it is
I
for
don't
the
know.
coders to
Yeah.
sort that out, but
Coming soon, Mirka. Coming soon, the offline material. A question from Ashley: How do you envision future technology influencing how we teach?
Should we give this one for Graham? He's been quiet for a while.
Yeah, for in person instead of being online. I mean, you have these beautiful interactive whiteboards that are coming out, but they're out already, but they're very expensive. I don't know how much they cost. I'm sure they're thousands. The difficulties with using more and more technology is sometimes it's not quite at the same level as you are. As a teacher, you have to learn to use new technology all the time, but that's not easy. I find procedurally working with electronic equipment really difficult. I like to write with pen and paper, but you can use a scribe, a little pen like this. So there is more and more technology to help us older folks get used to what's coming out. I hope that helps.
It's not an alternative. We still have to think about the way that we teach. We have to think about our product and how we teach English, and technology facilitates that. But as long as it's there to facilitate, not as a separate thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you mention learning online to be a teacher, obviously, we all scoffed, and there's a reason for that. So it depends how it's
Technology is a
applied.
tool that we use in order to convey a message and to
Yeah.
teach. Yeah. Great. Okay, so let's talk about the new ways of interacting, the new roles of employers and employees. Is there a shift in our relationship as well? So, for instance, traditionally, the traditional relationship is a vertical one. We have the director, and the employee. Has this changed over the past years?
I mean, I guess to some extent it has, because we have to kind of, like you said, be working horizontally. So I mentioned before about working together, and so we work as teachers together. But I think it's also important we work with the owner, the manager, whoever that may be, to convey our ideas, to put our points across.
I think teaching is a very skill-based job. It's not like in another place. It's not in retail, for example, or in marketing, where the teachers know what works and what doesn't work in their classroom. So it's very important within teaching to have some platform for the teachers to share their experiences. I think the problem when I've worked in the public sector in the UK is that maybe the people who assign the curriculum and the people who observe the classes to test the teachers aren't teachers themselves. So they have lofty ideas, but they don't know how it works in practice. That's a really dangerous thing, I think, for teaching. It has to have that communication, teachers to express themselves to improve the project.
The teacher is a partner. The teacher has to be actively involved in the process of creating material and content and the methodology that you were talking about. Yeah, I agree. We have another question. Is there any new technology that Oxbridge is going to use in the near future? We have so many ideas there, and you guys, the teachers, are the ones that let us know what you need. So everything that we've done has been based on what your needs are. So definitely yes. What else can we do? So many things. But I think that the idea of the teacher being able to participate and edit, that has been the main difference.
Yeah.
What else in design? We can work a lot.
I mean, nothing's perfect, right? So there's always room for improvement.
Driverless cars to get to classes.
Driverless car.
While we're asking for the iPad. I don't know, I'm not technological.
Excellent. In our next talk, we're going to talk about new business opportunities, taking it that the sector is changing and new business models are emerging. So what new opportunities are there for English teachers? We're going to discuss that in our next talk. Many thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.
Graham, thank you very much. And for all of you who want to join us, you can do it at oxinity.com. Bye.
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 Bye-bye.